The country posted its lowest economic performance in 3 years with 2018 GDP at 6.2%. That's well below government targets. They say aside from inflation, there are other factors that held back growth. We've got Bim Santos with this report.
For the past 28 years, Aling Zenaida has been selling fruits and rice in Quezon City. But she admits that since last year, high prices have been dragging her sales.
May buwan lang talaga na maganda yung kita namin. 20% ang naaalis sa benta namin. Basta kasi kami pagka nagkakaproblema sa prutas, yung bang mga lokal namin na binibili. Katulad pag dumarating kasi yung may binabaha, ganyan. Mataas ang bili namin. Humihina naman ang sales namin.
Inflation has been tagged as one of the culprits that weighed down growth last year. The country's gross domestic product or GDP clocked in at 6.2% for 2018, lower than the 6.7% in 2017. It was also the lowest in 3 years. Last year's GDP also missed the government's growth target range of 6.5 to 6.9%, which was already reduced from the initial 7 to 8% goal. Aside from inflation, the National Economic and Development Authority also tagged the poor performance of the agriculture and manufacturing sectors as factors that dampen growth.
I would highlight the performance of agriculture. A drop from 7%, 4% to 0.8% is a major failure, a major debacle for agriculture. And I would say that also we had high inflation rates last year, especially in the third quarter.
We also see the slowdown in the manufacturing sector, and we think that this is really due to very weak business sentiments brought about by policy uncertainties, and that is why we are proposing that for this year we focus on removing this policy uncertainties.
The palace also expressed dismay at the country's economic showing last year.
Siyempre, you always have a concern when you don't reach a certain target. But you work harder so that you can reach it the next time. Kung walang inflation rate na nagka-problema, mas mataas pa tayo sa target.
But for this year, NEDA says they are bullish that the country can finally hit the 7 to 8% growth target due to stronger consumer, election, and infrastructure spending.
Aspiration is a serious aspiration. And we are serious about trying to reach that.
Bim Santos, We Are One News.
To discuss further, we have with us in the studio business correspondent Bim Santos. Bim, they're talking about 7 to 8% growth. How doable is that?
The thing is, since over the last decade or since 2010, there were only about 2 instances or 2 years when we hit a growth of 7%. So that was in 2010 and 2013. Both, of course, are election years. In 2016, during the presidential election, muntik na. It's actually 6.9%. So according to the economic managers, election spending usually brings about 0.5% in contribution to economic growth, which is still quite a significant uplift. But aside from election spending, there will also need consumer spending to kick in, which is something they are counting on, especially as prices are more stable right now. But the thing is, though most analysts actually expect the economy to rebound this year, most forecasts actually comes south of 7%, with the ADB forecast at 6.7% being the most generous. So though 7 to 8% growth target is not impossible, it may be challenging to say the least.
Okay, you mentioned two things, election spending and also if consumer spending picks up. But what about government spending? We had been talking about public spending, government spending since last year, especially with this major push for infrastructure. Will that finally happen in the next year?
Well, government economic managers are very keen in terms of kickstarting their much touted build program. According to data, they're targeting of the 75 flagship projects, about 31 is slated for completion before President Duterte steps down. But one thing in terms of a downside that may have happened this year is the reenacted budget that may have possibly sapped momentum. According to us, Budget Secretary Ben Jokno has said the reenacted budget will have consequences in terms of project timelines, in terms of projects that are due to start this year.
Okay, other than the reenacted budget, are there other things that could keep back growth? Any other headwinds that we should flag?
One thing also that was a major drag in our economic performance for 2018 was weak exports, which was largely borne by a sluggish global economy. Of course, that's also something that something to watch out for this year, especially that China's economy is expected to slow down this year. China, of course, is a major partner in a number of the government's infrastructure projects. Aside from that, the U.S.-China trade war is also something to keep tabs on if and when that there are further developments in that, as well as possible tightening conditions in emerging markets due to the continued strength of the U.S. dollar.
Maraming salamat, Bim Santos.